In 2016, Amazon launched its Just Walk Out prototype. They always claimed that they were using game-changing AI technology that could recognize the things you picked up. However, sometime later, it was discovered that the truth behind this technology was not so glamorous.
It was recently revealed that the system was actually heavily dependent on a large team of over 1,000 overseas workers based mostly in India.
There are hundreds of examples like this, in which major tech companies claim to use cutting-edge technology. However, behind that technology, there are hundreds and thousands of workers in countries with cheap labor.
Far from the world's glitzy tech hubs, these data workers train AI systems by sifting through massive amounts of harmful data.
It is estimated that in India, data labeling specialists training AI models earn only $8,000 a year.
Thought by many to be powered only by computers, AI often relies on a massive human workforce, and there are significant questions about the treatment of those workers.
This has led tech companies to take advantage of this cheap labor to train their AI models, generating billions of dollars in profits. So how do tech companies use cheap labor to train their AI models? In the era of automation and artificial intelligence, the models powering virtual assistants, machine translators, and recommendation systems do not train themselves. Behind these sophisticated technologies are thousands of data workers, responsible for labeling images, transcribing audio, and classifying content. Despite the dominant narrative that presents artificial intelligence as a product of high-end engineering developed on Silicon Valley campus, this vision does not reflect the full reality.
Artificial intelligence is evolving fast, but most people don't realize that AI developments can often be fueled by an unseen and sometimes exploited human workforce.
A large part of the essential tech work required for AI functionality is carried out by people located in the Global South. These individuals are hired through remote work platforms and receive annual salaries that rarely exceed a few $1,000s. OpenAI, for example, hired Kenyan workers through the company Sama to label toxic content used to train its AI model. These workers earned between $1.32 and $2 per hour, depending on their performance and seniority. This phenomenon of massive outsourcing raises questions about the sustainability, fairness, and impact of this dynamic on the U.S. labor market. As tech companies accumulate billions of dollars in profits, a global invisible workforce sustains their growth.
While they carry out the often grueling task of keeping AI systems clean, international corporations on the other side of the globe reap the profits.
At the same time, U.S. workers face job precarity and the displacement of traditional employment. The rise of artificial intelligence has triggered an explosion in the demand for labeled and curated data. According to a report, the global market for AI data services surpassed $5 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $10 billion by 2026. This industry, vital for training machine learning models, relies on tech jobs that are often carried out for pennies on platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk or Remo Tasks.
Joanne tagged all sorts of content. These odd jobs came in around the clock. She was paid by the task, often just cents.
These platforms allow tech companies to outsource tasks that require human intervention, such as recognizing objects in images, determining the tone of a sentence, or correcting subtitles. Instead of hiring workers in the U.S. labor market, these companies subcontract people in the Philippines, India, Venezuela, or Kenya, where annual salaries can be less than $2,000. In Manila and Philippines, for example, data labeling workers earn around $7 per hour. In contrast, a tech worker in the United States earns, on average, an annual salary of over $100,000. A study revealed that more than 60% of platform-based microworkers are located in low- and middle-income countries. For example, in 2024, an analysis of Remo Tasks showed that over 90% of its active users came from outside the United States, with significant concentrations in Latin America and Southeast Asia. These workers often spend between 30 and 50 hours per week on these platforms, earning just a few $100s a month.
Yeah, this work is done across the globe, but a lot of this work is done in the Global South because, frankly, there's cheaper labor there.
Meanwhile, the companies that rely on this tech labor are recording astronomical revenues. OpenAI, for instance, valued at over $80 billion, has admitted to using data labeling services carried out by African workers paid just $1.32 per hour. Other giants such as Google, Meta, and Microsoft also outsource large parts of their data pipelines to subcontractors operating in regions with cheap labor. This economic model, which favors cost-cutting at all costs, has deep consequences for the U.S. labor market. On the other hand, it also puts downward pressure on annual salaries, even within the U.S. tech sector itself, by devaluing tasks considered auxiliary but essential to AI development.
All of their positions will be outsourced to HCL Technologies in India.
Between 2018 and 2023, the number of information technology jobs grew by just 5% in the United States, far below the 40% global growth of the AI sector during the same period. Although tech companies have generated billions of dollars in net profits, these gains have not translated into significant domestic job creation. On the contrary, automation and outsourcing have contributed to greater wealth concentration, with a handful of companies accumulating capital while reducing their reliance on local labor. While training AI models can cost over $100 million per model, the budget allocated to data workers represents only a tiny fraction, usually less than 1% of the total. This means that the workers who make artificial intelligence possible receive just a few $1,000s for critical tasks in models that generate billions in returns for their owners. Furthermore, the opacity of contracts and the lack of international regulation mean that many of these workers lack labor protections.
Oftentimes they face very low pay. Sometimes this work is done for pennies. They have uncertainty of whether or not they're going to get paid, and there's really not a lot of power to contest those decisions.
They face an overload of repetitive tasks, constant surveillance, and irregular pay, all in the name of technological innovation. Moreover, this global imbalance could end up negatively affecting the competitiveness of the U.S. labor market. This not only creates external dependency, but also limits the development of a strong domestic tech value chain. A report warns that without a clear strategy to reintegrate these tech jobs into the U.S. labor market, the country could face a decline in its capacity for inclusive innovation. In 2024, the global AI market surpassed $200 billion, with a significant portion of this wealth concentrated in fewer than 10 U.S. companies. However, the profits have not been equitably distributed. While executives receive million-dollar bonuses, the workers who label data earn just a few $100s a month. Artificial intelligence, the symbol of contemporary technological progress, rests on a fragmented, outsourced, and deeply unequal labor structure. The invisible tech jobs outsourced to countries with cheap labor represent a paradox. The smarter the machine becomes, the more precarious the conditions of the human who trains it.
In 2023, a Time magazine investigation found that tech companies were paying people in the global south less than $2 per hour to do this type of work.
This model, driven by the pursuit of efficiency and cost reduction, has generated billions in profits for major tech companies, but has left the U.S. labor market behind, unable to absorb a significant share of the jobs generated by this industry. In light of this situation, there is a need to reconsider the role of human labor in the development of artificial intelligence. As investments in research increase, there is also the possibility of implementing policies that more clearly recognize and structure the participation of those who contribute to these technological advances.
At Economy Media, your opinion matters to us. Subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments below.